Welcome to day 20 of NTI. Man, this has been a blast. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos and you're finding them to be helpful. Don't hesitate to email me any questions you might have. I know you aren't able to watch the YouTube or the Zoom videos if you're watching these YouTube videos. I assume that that's why you're watching these YouTube videos. Or maybe you're doing both, which is awesome. But don't hesitate to email me any questions, any concerns. I am here to help. All right, let's get started with yesterday's exit ticket, or the day 19's exit ticket. So we start off with 86/100th compared to 87/100th. I have nothing in my ones place. I have 2 8s in my tens place. So it doesn't matter. They're both the same. So I'm going to move on to my hundredths place. And I notice in my hundredths place, I have a 7, which is greater than 6. Therefore making the second number, 87/100th, greater. The second one for your exit ticket was 2 9/10 compared to 2 6/10. So I have 2's in my ones places. I get to the 10th place, I have a 9 and I have a 6. Obviously 9's greater, which means 2 9/10 is the greater number. And our last exit ticket question. We have 6 13,000th compared to 6 800th. Okay? So we have 6's in the ones place. We have 0's in the tens place. But then when we get out to the hundredths place, we see we have an 8 compared to a 1. 8's larger, which makes 6 800th the larger number. So today we're going to now focus, still using decimals, we're going to focus on rounding decimals. This tends to be a little bit more of a challenge compared to just comparing decimals. So due to this, we're going to focus on, at each time we're rounding a number, what are my two options? What are the two options that I could round the number to? Okay? So let's get started. We're going to focus the first 4 problems on rounding to the nearest tens place, and then we'll move on to rounding to the nearest hundredth place. All right, so round each number to the nearest 10th place. So I'm going to label where my numbers are. So that's the ones place. That's the tenths place. And that's the hundredths place. So if I'm rounding to the nearest tenths place, that's the number that's either going to change by moving up 1 or staying where it's at. Meaning it's either going to be 5/10 or it's going to be 6/10. Now the number to the right, the place value to the right of it, is the number that tells me what I'm doing, whether I'm pushing up to 6/10 or if I'm just going to stay at 5/10. So the best way to think of this is 5 and above, you give it a shove. 4 and below, you let it go. Okay? So you got to look at this number here and say, is that 5 and above? Well, yeah. Okay? On my number line, which I'm creating to help me here, the number that falls between this is going to be 55/100th. Now, that can be a challenge to figure out. Well, how do you get 55/100th when you have 5/10 and 6/10? So what I like to do is I like to turn these into the place value of that's next, which is 50, 100th, and 60, 100th. Now you can look at this number and look at it as just as a 57 and say, all right, well, where does 57 fall when it's 50 and 60? Well, and I have 55 in the middle. So 57 is going to be somewhere around here. So not only can you see that you have to move it up, because 5 and above you give it a shove, but also you can visually see where it's in the number line and see, hey, it is closer to 6/10, which means when I'm rounding each number to the nearest tenths, I would round this number to 6/10. I could also call it 60 100th. Same problem, same answer. They're equivalent. All right, now let's have you guys practice one. So at number 2, I have 9 d700th 8,000th. Go ahead and round that to the nearest 10th place. Remember, this is our 10th place. Hit the pause button now. Okay, so I'm going to walk us through this. What are my 2 options? Well, I can either leave it at 9/10, or wait a second, 10/10? Does that make sense? To say 10/10? No. What's 1 more tenth? If I were to add 1 more tenth, I would get 1 whole. I could turn these numbers into 90 100th and 1 whole, okay? Or I could say that's a 100 100ths, which is also 1 whole. Therefore, my number in between the two would be 95 100th. And I can visually see now that this number is going to fall somewhere around here, 90. So therefore, I'm going to shift it up to 1 whole. Or just say 1. So my first answer, I'm going to say 6/10. My second answer, I'm going to say just 1 whole. So in doing this, I'm not only looking at this number here, the number next to the place value that I'm rounding, to tell me if I need to shove it up or let it go, okay? Give it a shove or let it go. But I'm also using a number line to visually see that. Moving on to number 3. Okay, 1 and 56 100th. Go ahead and round that to the nearest tenths. So I'm rounding to the nearest tenths. The 6 is going to tell me what to do. My 2 options are 1 and 5/10 and 1 and 6/10. Don't forget the 1. A lot of times students will just put 5/10 and 6/10. Don't forget there's a 1 there. So it's 1 and 5/10, 1 and 6/10. If I put this on a number line, I can see it's going to be right about there, telling me I should round up to 1 and 6/10. All right, number 4. 3 and 87 thousandth. 3 and 87 thousandth. Go ahead and round it to the nearest 10th place. Okay, so my 2 options are going to be 3. I could just leave the 0 in the 10th place. So it's going to be 3 or shoving up to 3.1, or 3 and 1/10. So the way I came up with 3 and 5/10 being my number down the middle, 3 and 500th, sorry for that, is I could make this so that it's 0 and 10. And obviously the number between 0 and 10 is going to be 5. But really this is not 10, it's 3 and 10/100th. And this is just 3. I could say 300th as well. That would be improper though. I noticed that there's an 8 in the hundredths place, which tells me to also shove it up to 3 and 1/10 being my answer. All right, we're going to now move on to number 5, 6, 7, and 8. Number 5, I'm going to demonstrate. I have 6, I'm rounding to the nearest hundredths place. So there's my hundredths place. That's my next value. That's the thousandths place. It's going to tell me, it's kind of like the boss. It's going to tell me what to do. Okay? So 6 and 34/100ths is one option, just keeping it, or shifting it up 1 to 6 and 35/100th. My middle number was going to be 6 and 34/100th 5,000th. I could look at this number as 340, 345, and 350. If I did that, I'm going to hide that 5 because that 5 does not matter at all. Okay, and I can see I have 346, which is going to be right about there, which means I'm going to round it up to 6 and 35/100th. All right, so now I'm going to have you, same concept, but we're just shift the place value, that's all. I'm going to have you work on the next one now. So number 6, don't be afraid of all these extra numbers here. We're only rounding the nearest hundredths place, okay? So that digit is the only digit that really matters. The hundredth, and then the digit that matters is the thousandth that tells the hundredth what to do. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, so my two options are going to be 3 and 14/100th. So I just hid the 5 and everything after. And then what's one more than 14 is 15. So it's 3 and 15. But to help me visually figure out my middle number, I turn this into 140 and 145, 150. And I can visually see 145 plus a little extra is going to be right about there, which is going to force me to shift up to 3 and 15/100th, or 3 and 15/100. Yeah, 3 and 15/100. Being 3 and 15/100th being my answer, because there's nothing in the thousandths place. Alrighty. Hopefully you're feeling pretty confident with this. Let's move on. Okay, we have, this is a tough one to say because we're dealing with 10,000th here. We don't normally deal with 10,000th, but it doesn't matter what the 10,000th is. That's the place value that we're going to either keep or change based off of that digit there. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so this might sound silly, but my one option is just literally to round it down to 0. Right? Because that's the 0 place there. It's 0 in the hundredths place, I should say. Okay? The other option is to move it up 1 to 1/100th. My middle number is going to be 5,000th. Okay? I could make it look like that. So it looks like 5,000th or 10,000th. 0, 5, and 10. And it's going to be right about there at 8,000th. Will be right about there, which means I'm going to shift up. Because the 8 also tells me 5 and above, give it a shove. Last one. Number 8. Round it to the nearest hundredths place again. So with this one, I have either 2 and 58/100th, 2 and 59,000th, sorry, 2 and 59/100th, 2 and 58/100th. There's a 6 in the thousandths place that tells me to round up. So I'm going to round it up to 2 and 59/100th. All right, boys and girls, best of luck on your exit ticket. We'll see you here tomorrow. Thanks a lot.